Welcome to another episode of the More People podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Fitzmaurice, CEO at MorePeople. Our guest in this episode, Paul Willgoss. I'm going to read this to make sure I don't get it wrong. Formerly Technical Director of Marks & Spencer's, currently Independent Chair of Modern Slavery Intelligence Network, Director of PW Food and Farming, and member of the International Advisory Board at AmFresh.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Absolute pleasure. Delighted.
For people who don't know you already, a bit of context in your background, who you are.
27 years at Marks & Spencer, of which 13 as Technical Director. Before that, I was in consulting. And I left M&S 2 years ago, it was sort of March 22, and set up my own consulting business, really with an aim to support supply chains in being innovative, being quite disruptive in transformation, innovation, and so on. So yeah, having good fun, quite busy.
Well, there's a variety there, so there's lots of things for us to talk about. First and foremost, was quite keen to talk to you about MSIN, Modern Slavery Intelligence Network. So you've been doing that for a few years now.
Yeah.
This is a member organisation set up primarily by retailers, food manufacturers. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. If we go back to an investigation and a prosecution called Operation Fort, where about 450 people in the UK were found to have been enslaved in some way, exploited by criminal gangs, some of which turned up in or were being exploited unwittingly in the food supply chains. I, along with John Shropshire from G's Fresh and Dame Sarah Thornton, who was the independent anti-slavery commissioner, agreed that it was something that the industry should look at, because one of the things that we couldn't do, or we weren't doing, was sharing intelligence amongst the different businesses, at least not in an organised way. So the whole purpose of setting up Modern Slavery Intelligence Network is a collaboration of businesses coming together to share intelligence on labour exploitation and slavery within the food and agriculture sector within the UK, acknowledging that actually the food supply chains coming into the UK are also of key concern. And our purpose is to protect individuals that are being exploited and disrupt the criminal organisations that are actually perpetrating the crimes.
Okay. Worldwide, where are we today? We're talking about there being potentially more slaves now in one context or another than any other time in history. More than 3 times the figure from the Atlantic slave trade, 40 million people. A chunk of those are children, another even bigger chunk are women. Is that contextually the right sort of number?
Yeah, and I think, and in the UK it's 140,000, or that's the sort of rough number that people talk about. The reality is, of course, nobody really knows.
Yeah.
I think the big difference now is that people being exploited and enslaved in some way is happening in our everyday lives, but it's actually happening right in front of us, and we don't recognise it. A lot of us will not recognise the fact that, car washes, nail bars, the care sector, anywhere where people are employed casually, temporarily, and is where there's an opportunity for criminal gangs to put people in to be exploited. And they move between sectors. This is the big issue that we've got here, is that people don't come in and place people in a particular sector and just stay in that sector. I mean, there's a lot of movement between different sectors. The care sector particularly vulnerable at the moment. The food sector probably a little bit less than it was a few years ago because the visa schemes are working a lot better. But construction, security, hospitality sector, etc., etc. So anywhere where there are lots of people on hourly or temporary contracts.
So where these crimes are being perpetrated, is the lay person on the street either, are they turning a blind eye to it, or is it not a blind eye at all? It's an education piece that people aren't realising that this is actually manifest in those sectors.
I think it's there, but we don't recognise it. What we decided as an industry, and we had a a conference which John Shropshire hosted in Ely 4 years ago. And we were very clear, I was very, very clear. This is the food industry's problem. It's our industry, it's our reputation, it's our supply chain, and these people are working for us in one way, shape or form. Therefore, we need to take responsibility, step forward and try and resolve this. We are the only sector that's doing this in the way that we are. And I'm told that this is unique globally as well. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. We're definitely pioneering something. And what we now need to do is we need to mainstream the activity that we're in. We need a lot more businesses to participate. And then we need to be moving towards a multi-sectoral approach. So we need the construction industry, we need the care sector, we need the hospitality sector, we need the food and farming sector to actually have similar approaches, will be bespoke to their particular situations and circumstances. And we're just at that point now of expanding the network in food and farming initially. But we're getting quite a lot of interest from other sectors wanting to join.
Well, I can see why. So hopefully it will snowball and turn into something with a lot of momentum where the collaboration becomes significantly easier because the what's in it for me for those participants is so self-evident. Is it then a matter of MSIN having a central database of the intelligence and the information that people can log on to and share? How does it actually work?
So the mechanics of it, which actually is the bit we spent loads of time when I go back to sort of governance and compliance. There are two databases run by Stop the Traffic, who manage these sorts of platforms for us. The first one is a secure database. What that means is nothing can come. That's where the members put intelligence in. Nothing can come out of that database until Stop the Traffic have verified it and validated it. And the person who owns the data, the person who put it in, the company that put it in, is actually confident that it's actually moving forward. It then gets shared with the whole membership through the second database, which is the shared database. Yeah, so there's a secure database and a shared one. The reason for that is, the first is we had to build enormous trust between the members to actually put this intelligence in. Okay, that's the first thing. Because effectively what you're acknowledging is, I have found a problem of labour exploitation in my supply chain. That's what you're saying. So reputationally, that's quite challenging. The reason it's great that we've got most of the retailers involved with the network is that actually the manufacturers and the farming businesses can relax a bit in putting their hand up. What we also do is we anonymise everything. So when it comes out into the shared database, you've no idea where it's come from or which business it's come from. You might know the geography, but you will not know where it's come from. And also, very importantly, we protect the identity of the victim, because that ultimately is what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to stop the practice, but we're trying to protect the victim. So that database piece, linked to the trust that we build between the members, is critically important.
Going back to a different application of trust, thinking about your days in retail, we place an enormous amount of trust in the food that we eat in terms of its safety, its provenance, its quality, and M&S is at the forefront of food in regards to most of those things. 20 years at M&S, 20 odd years at M&S. What were the most significant things you saw change in that time?
I joined M&S in the mid-90s. And at that point, we were innovating at an incredible pace. It was long after the sandwich and the ready meal, but we were still innovating strongly, and we were increasingly doing things which were customer focused. So a lot of the innovations we did in terms of taking colours, artificial colours out, artificial flavours, we took hydrogenated vegetables out, etc. We drove animal welfare standards. All about building trust that the consumer walking into the store would look at the name above the door and make certain assumptions. I think when I joined the business in the mid-90s, we were still writing the rules. Okay, so some of the things that we were doing around, chilled prepared salads, there wasn't any legislative framework to do. We had to write those rules ourselves. And that was brilliant because, of course, it enabled us to actually create markets and create categories. Underlying all of that, of course, you've still got, allergy management was a huge issue and growing today. You've still got things like, pathogen management, so Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, etc., which again it's still there in the industry. It's still a risk that needs to be managed and mitigated. Having the right standards, and it comes back to having the right supply chains and setting those supply chains up to deliver the right outcome. And one of the things I was really, I've always been blown away by in many respects is the commitment of the manufacturers, the processors and the farmers and the growers to actually go and do the difficult stuff, because some of this is really tough, right? And it's not obvious. The solutions are not always obvious, but to get up in the morning and really drive those standards and believe in those standards and that you're doing the right thing is tremendous. And certainly having come out of retail and now working predominantly with the manufacturing and the growing side of the supply chain, I've been hugely reassured. Things happen, things go wrong, but broadly speaking, I think the UK food industry has probably got the highest food safety standards, and it's probably got the best track record of protecting consumers from food safety risk.
Yeah, it certainly feels like the UK is the envy of the rest of the world in terms of where it places that in its priority list. So, question to finish on, question we ask all our guests is, if you could go back in time and meet your younger self, your 24-year-old self, and pass on one piece of advice, what you wished you knew then that you know now, what piece of advice would you give to your 24-year-old self?
The first thing is take every opportunity that comes at you. All right, don't end up at the end of your career, and I'm not saying I've got any regrets at all, but I took every opportunity that came my way. The second thing, can I have three?
Yeah.
It's a bit like Desert Island Discs, isn't it? The second thing is a real perspective. I was told this when I first joined M&S, which will date the phrase I use, but I was told, if you look after the business, son, the business will look after you. And I believe that that's absolutely true, that you will be recognised and rewarded for what you contribute to the business. So make it about the business, not about you. Right. The final thing is, don't ever underestimate how important your network is. Maintain it, work at it, and give people time back as much as you take time from other people. But your network is really, really important as you develop your career and you go places, because it's how you get stuff done.
Probably a big plug there for MSIN and IFST and other membership trade associations are available. But yeah, I like that one a lot. Cool. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks.